Hello and welcome to another episode of Bare Bones Wargaming, a show with no bells, no whistles, no frills, just a man, a camera, and his game. On this episode, I'm going to talk about something that I think might be of use to some of you. Excuse me, because most of you know that, of course, I am a 95% solo gamer, especially war games. So that means once I break out a new war game, I almost invariably am all by myself, so to speak. Or, again, I guess you could say, new war game out and alone again, naturally. Sorry, just having a bit of fun with that. Okay, one more bit of fun with that. Or you could also say that when it comes to war games, I am a rock. I am a solo war gamer. So, in the efforts of playing them solo, most games are adaptable. You can do different things. Today, of course, Stuka Joe's method with CDG games is very good. I've used that quite a bit, which, by the way, again, GMT is making a nice polished kit of that. If you'd like to look into that, that's still on the P500 list. And of course there's other things too that I've shared with you guys before, some simple methods like the 2 and 3 card method. Other things like the Triumph and Tragedy that I designed myself to set the table, as it were, for each country. But there are a few games over the years that I basically have found impossible to solo, despite my best efforts. Now, one thing I want to clarify here is just that. Despite my best efforts, I still was not able to make it work solo. So we're not talking about games that I think are broken or games that I think are historically off the rails, inaccurate, whatever. We're not talking about games like that. We're talking about games that I have given my best shot to make play solo, and it just doesn't work. Despite trying the usual tricks, trying to create my own systems to do it, it just hasn't worked. So that's what I'm going to share with you here in this episode. Some of these games are no longer in my collection, for obvious reasons. Some of them I keep for a variety of reasons. Some of them are difficult to unload because the interest just isn't there, to be completely frank about it. Most of these games are not unpunched or anything like that. So, or, desperately scarce. Although one is, which we'll get to as we go through my little presentation here on this. Okay. So, again, just going to talk about each game briefly. Why I had trouble making it work solo. Why I think it will not work solo. Short of an act of God or Congress. Well, maybe not even Congress. But anyway, short of divine intervention, it probably would not work out. Okay. So, that's where we're going here with this episode tonight. So again, some of the games I will show you right here on the table. Some of them I will use my phone, and thanks for the recommendation for one of my viewers. It won't time out as quickly, and you won't get to see my ugly mug reflected. Anyway, so let's get started. Alright, first game I'm going to talk about is a game that I've held on to be honest, because I'm hoping one of my kids, probably not my oldest one. Alexander's just not all that interested. It seems like he doesn't have the patience, I think. But my younger guy, Nikolai, he might be able to pull it off. Is this one here. This is Guadalcanal. And of course, I'm also talking about the sister game, Midway, from Avalon Hill Game Company, the Smithsonian series of games. The big problem with this, and I bought this a while ago, before I realized the mechanic that was in it that basically makes it almost impossible to play solo. Although, there are a couple other games I've made this work with. And that's basically the double blind issue. Where you really need either a referee or you need a screen and things like that. Because Guadalcanal, Midway, the Smithsonian editions here, they have boards for each player. So basically there's lots of hidden stuff going on, which makes sense in a carrier game. I mean, there should be lots of hidden stuff going on. Yeah, but it makes it very difficult, especially since the boards are very, very small. They're not very large at all. I mean, if you look here, I think there's a good picture on the back. If you look here, you can see that, there's not really that many miles, the scale here, I forget what the scale is, but it's like twice what Flat Top is, as I recall. So it's a pretty big scale, because here's Henderson Field, here's New Georgia. I mean, that's not, you know, that's not very far at all. Okay, so this one, and granted, this one does tell you. Some games do and some games don't. But this one definitely is impossible to solo. I've tried some different methods. I have nothing against randomness, because, you know, as a former chess player, I know sometimes people make weird decisions. Now, granted, sometimes that happens under time pressure, but sometimes it just happens like in the most calm, serene setting where they don't have to be rushed. And I don't mind that. You know, like my system I designed for Triumph and Tragedy, that doesn't really bother me because, first of all, actually, my system works out fine because I've had competitive games every time I play. Now, that could mean either my system is good or I'm just very bad. Who knows? Could be a little of both. But my point is that I don't mind creating a random situation where then I take advantage, you know, like my opponent allowing a backward pawn in a game of chess or something like that, or leaving a piece hanging. So there's like a juicy tactical opportunity there. But if it cannot really fall within certain parameters, I guess is what I'm trying to say. If it can't really fall within the realm of, okay, this seems like something somebody could try, then I kind of give it up. So, Guadalcanal, Midway, Smithsonian, it just doesn't work. Now, granted, keep in mind, this is just my interpretation of it. You could disagree. Maybe some of you have come up with solo ways to play this, and that'd be great. Share them. But I haven't been able to. And again, I'm just trying to do this as kind of like, you know, just to share, so that if you've been thinking about some of these games and be like, gosh, I wonder how that would play solo, then, you know, then I can let you know that for my opinion, you know, like the genie in Aladdin, wrong, then, you know, you at least got a little bit of a warning there before you go digging around and or spending your hard-earned cash. Second game is an old game that I'm sure most of you probably have played at some point in your life, and that is Supremacy. Okay, Supremacy to me is glorified Risk. It's Risk on steroids, but it is not as good as Spheres of Influence, because Spheres of Influence has that number of cards put in the deck, gives you that chit pool feel. The basic game of Supremacy, you basically can play much like Risk, in my opinion. And although the little black mushroom clouds are totally cool, they're great. I love those pieces. But, excuse me. But if you play it like that, then it's like playing Risk by yourself. And it's like, well, what's the point of that? Now, if you do add the extra resource deck to the game, then you have that. But again, since you're playing, you know, between, 2 and 5 countries, 2 to 6 players, it says on the box. If you're trying to play 6, and you know what other people have in their hand, and you really can't, you know, do the 2 or 3 card method, because you really can't plan ahead very well, then it kind of kills the game. The other problem is that it does take forever, too. This is a slow-playing game, even when you play with other people. When you play by yourself, holy cow. Not even holy cow, a whole herd of cattle is the problem. So, for that reason, Supremacy is one that I have tried to do multiplayer solo. It just doesn't, it doesn't work. It doesn't have enough variety, or something like Cataclysm, which has the chit pool. You know, you put your chits in there and see what kind of chit comes out, right? It doesn't have that, and because it is too much information, I guess playing Supremacy is kind of like playing a game of chess by yourself or a game of Go by yourself. You're not going to get very far. You know, that's how I kind of think of Supremacy. So, Supremacy also game that I have tried to make this play solo, because it is cool and it has cool pieces, it has cool expansions. I love the tanks, I love the SOBMs, the ballistic missile subs, but phew, that just does not work. Another multiplayer game that I've tried to make work and I haven't been able to is Clash of Monarchs. Clash of Monarchs, of course, 7 Years' War in Europe, which Friedrich the Great is one of my dearest and oldest friends when it comes to military history. But again, this is a CDG game, which playing a multiplayer game to begin with can be tricky. But when you throw in CDG elements where people have their hands and you really didn't know everybody's hands, or you know, certain countries don't really have that many cards to begin with in their decks, it really kind of limits the possibilities and it kind of kills it for solo play. again, you could try to play this along historical lines, but if that's true, then you might as well play the Great Crisis of Frederick II, or if you want to go way back, the campaigns of Frederick the Great, because basically that's what you'd be doing anyway, minus the cards. I mean, I like the point-to-point map and everything, and I have actually bought this game when it first came out from GMT, traded it away, bought a second copy because I was like, yes, I can do this. Again, like, when I just enjoy the movie Aladdin, like, yes, he can be taught, but it can't. It just doesn't work. And I say the same thing about Here I Stand. I did do Here I Stand as a pre-order P500 one, and the topic is interesting, but again, it's just so many different powers involved, and so much going on with the card play and the interaction between the different powers that there's no way to create a feasible, sustainable parameter situation for each power to make it work. So, unfortunately, despite the look of this thing, because it is a very nice game, it just doesn't work solo. I've spent quite a bit of time trying to make this work and just been frustrated, wanting to pull my hairs out and stuff like that. So, unfortunately, Clash of Monarchs is another one I found that is impossible to solo. Again, in my opinion, be it ever so humble. Another game, and this is one from not too long ago that came out recently, is Europe Divided. Now, the premise is pretty cool. I like it. I like the mechanics in the game. My wife and I have played this game together, and it's been enjoyable. Someday, once we get the kids on a regular sleep schedule and have actually a little time, sorry, excuse me while I'm laughing there, it'd be great to try this again. But the problem solo, I mean, you can see the dust. You can see it's been a while since, look at that, as I pulled that off the shelf. The problem is that for scoring purposes, you have basically, like, for lack of a better way to articulate it, headline cards. They might even be called headline cards. I'm trying to remember because I haven't played this in over a year. But the problem is that you have to plan ahead with those, and you have to put them down secretly, and then you flip them and stuff. So if you're planning ahead for both sides and know what both sides are going to have, that becomes a problem. Now, I did try just putting them down randomly. I mean, to quote Harry Shapiro in Starline 17, I mean, it was okay, but it just wasn't working. It either became unbalanced pretty badly, or it just became kind of ridiculous and hard to match cards, and it just didn't work. So, but again, I am keeping this game because my wife played it, enjoyed it. I'm hoping someday one of my boys will play it, potentially, knock on wood. But plus it's made in Poland, so I mean, yeah. What can I say? My heritage, right? Anyway, it's very hard because those headline things that you have to plan ahead. So that's where the real issue comes in from solo play, and then it kind of kills it because there's no good way to do that to make it work. I even tried things like, picking like 3 of them and, trying to prioritize and rolling dice and stuff, and it just didn't work. So Europe Divided, another game that I found was basically impossible to solo. But again, I enjoyed the game. And again, as I said before, this is no indictment of the games themselves in terms of mechanics or quality. It's just that can't make it work solo, despite my best efforts. Even if I bang my head off the wall for a month, I don't think I can make it work. But again, if some of you have made these games work solo, please share in the comments. Now this next one causes me pain because this, in my opinion, is one of the best games ever made. I know it's also on a lot of, oh look, I gave it away, I pushed it too close. Shoot, I was going to do a dramatic build-up. Anyway, there it is. Flat Top. I mean, Flat Top is, without a doubt, one of the best games ever made. But again, it's, you got the pad, plotting moves. The other side doesn't know for sure, where things are at in the search planes. And as you guys know, from those of you who are old-timers to my channel, I had a thread on Board Game Geek trying to make it work. I had some other things, but it got so dense and so many layers to it that I felt like I was Tolstoy writing the rules for this. this was going to be my War and Peace for Wargaming, and it just got to be too much. But again, the mechanics are great. I love the idea of the die roll. You know, basically, the way the combat system works, you know, you get X amount of hits, and then you roll a die and you either add one or take one away to have that element of randomness, which I think is a great, very effective little mechanic. It's very simple, but it's very cool. But it's just, you can't play this one. You can't. There's just too much. First of all, carrier games with the hidden movement are almost impossible unless you create a complete structure like John Souther did with Carrier in his upcoming Carrier Battles Philippine Sea game coming out here later this year. Unless you create an entire framework from scratch, from the ground up, if you will, it's just basically almost impossible to do that. So, and to make it more of a simulation than game. Like, to me, Fires of Midway is a game more than simulation. But again, I came up with a solo method to make that work. But it's just flat top. It's a great game, but it's just impossible to solo. There's just no way. It can't be done. Sorry. But I know the 200th anniversary of the death of l'Empereur is coming up here in a few days, and Napoleon always, you know, one of his famous quotes, "You write to me that it is impossible, the word is not French." Well, you know what? In this particular case, the word is English, and it's correct for this, sadly to say. Another game along those same lines is a very cool little game that if you do have a regular gaming partner, I highly recommend this game. Pacific Fury, Guadalcanal. It's all about the naval battles around Guadalcanal. It's very slick, easy mechanics that are a lot of fun, but the problem is you have to take your ships and put them face down and then put them in the different areas around Guadalcanal. The map is an area map. And the problem is that if you try to just randomly grab ships, like say from the Japanese side, and just put them face down and then sail them, you come up with a couple of problems. One is water depth, because you know the aircraft carriers can't get that close to the islands, for one thing. Another problem is doctrine issues, because you know the Japanese usually operated their carriers in pairs, so I mean you can't split Shukoku from Zukaku unless you were going completely off the deep end. And again, you know, within certain parameters, everything is fine and works. But if you really start to get past those parameters, then you're really kind of getting into, how should I put it, into a situation that it's okay to have a historical situation within the realm of possibility, even if that possibility is very stretched or sandboxy, for lack of a better way to put it. But some things, you know, there are some things you just can't do, or like Cool Hand Luke, some men you just can't reach. Well, in this particular case, like splitting those carriers, just that would not have happened from a Imperial Japanese Navy doctrine standpoint. So because of that, because you put your ships face down and put them in spaces and stuff, it's basically impossible to do. And I really, really tried to come up with something for this, and it just, you know, the element of surprise, that element of mystery was lost, and it just wasn't work. It just stopped. But again, if you have a regular wargaming partner, you really might want to look into this, because this is a very slick, fun game of the naval battles that went on around Guadalcanal from, you know, August to the end of the year in December of 1942. Another game, well, actually I should say these are kind of sister games here, so I'm going to talk about them together. These games here, one by printed by Hollenspiel, the other one that was published by Nuts Publishing, dealing with the First World War on the Eastern Front, which is the at all costs, and then To the Last Man, the Great War in the West. Again, the problem with this is the element that's needed for mystery. You know, not knowing which army was reinforced, because you have these cards that have the armies for both sides on them, and then that's kept basically like out of sight, hidden, so the other side doesn't know, like when you get your reinforcements, well, did you send it to the 4th Army, did you send it to the 3rd Army? And again, I tried very hard, especially with To the Last Man, because part of the reason I worked so hard on To the Last Man for the longest time is To the Last Man has a great number of what-if scenarios that go way back earlier than the First World War, which to me, since I like to play with history, as you all know, that was such a huge appeal with this game. But I just can't. I can't make it work. Not solo anyway, and it's unfortunate because both games are very cool. Both games have neat mechanics to them. The bloodless combat is a little odd to me for being World War One, but I'll leave that discussion for another time. But it's just impossible to solo. There's no way to do it because of that element that you need of mystery of, okay, well, who got the reinforcements, which ones did, where are they going to attack. It just, you can't, in my opinion, it can't be done. Another game, and I'm sure there are other games that fall into this category, is Quartermaster General. Now, Quartermaster General is a card game for one thing, but the thing that makes this one trickier than, say, some other CDG games, like, say, I have no trouble playing, as you all know, I have no trouble playing 30 Years War Solo or Europe in Turmoil Solo or games like that. The problem with this one is very heavily dependent on card combos. So if you're not looking at all the cards at once and not having the full picture of your hand, then it kind of limits things badly. Of course, then since you've got multiple countries involved, then if you know what other people have, then it's too easy to cancel things out. There's the element of surprise that's lost and missing, and it just won't work very well from that perspective. So Quartermaster General just has too many combos to really kind of work on that kind of level. So that's why I don't see it as being one that works really all that well for solo play. I've tried. My wife and I have played this together too, and I think it's an okay game. I know there's people who love this game, and again, I'm kind of like, well, I can take it or leave it, depending on my mood. So, but it is almost impossible to play solo because of the card combos. Pure and simple. Okay, moving along here. Another game, and actually this is a whole series of games. I'm just going to use this one to be representative of the group, is this one here. And let me zoom in so you guys can see the screen better. Let's get zoomed in there. There we go. This is Marching Through Georgia, which is part of the series of games that's done by Clash of Arms, their Civil War series. It's an area movement kind of game, but it relies again, kind of like Pacific Fury, it relies on having units face down, and having extra units for bluffing, which of course always makes things extremely difficult solo-wise, especially if the bluffing element, you can't just randomly mix it up because, it would unbalance things. You'd have too much of an advantage as the player. So I picked up quite a few of these games because I did like the mechanics. I thought the system was pretty cool. But again, I banged my head on this because at one point I think I owned all of these even. And I mean, I played them solo. It was okay, but without the dummy ones. And the fact that it was area movement too made it a little tricky because, you're not talking about hexes where you could, send a unit off one way and then be like, okay, well, is that the real unit stuff? That it's areas, and to me that makes it harder to try and do something solo. So it just didn't work. I eventually got rid of the entire series, although I did discover an extra one when I went up to my dad's house to visit him for the weekend. As I know some of you, I guess someone else just mentioned this, some of you old-timers know I mentioned some time ago my dad had cancer and stuff, and now he's moved into hospice, so, so I took the boys up to visit him, wanted to see him while he's still coherent, I guess is the word maybe to put it. And such. So while I was up there, I was kind of digging through some of my stuff in my old bedroom, and I didn't realize I had a second copy of this, because once upon a time I used to buy second copies of everything so I didn't have to haul them back and forth from where I was living and teaching. And I used to go up and help my dad with the family farm in the summer, and I didn't want to have to haul the games back and forth all the time, and since I was single, I was like, well, screw this, I'll just buy an extra copy. And that's kind of what I did. So anyway, that one I found marching through Georgia. I did not realize I still had a copy of this series. The rest of them I've all gotten rid of because, again, they're just too difficult to play solo. It just doesn't work. And again, I can't stress enough that, you know, this is not an indictment of the game itself or the system. It's just it doesn't work trying to play all by yourself. Okay. Another game that I think is actually very clever and very interesting, and again, one of my oldest and dearest friends here, Friedrich, is a very fun game, but again, you really can't play it solo because the combat cards that you need are in your hand, and it deals with highest number, with suits and stuff. But again, it's a very smooth mechanic. It's a lot of fun if you have the people to play with. But if you don't, and I did try to make this work solo, but I gave up on this pretty quick because it just wasn't there. It wasn't happening. You know, it's like like going out on a first date and it's not clicking. You know, it's just like, okay, you don't need to drag this out. So it was kind of in that kind of boat there. But again, I mean, it's a fun game. You know, if I had more people to play with it, I probably would still own it. But you just really can't make it work solo. And winding down our list here, another game that is difficult to do solo is Rumble in the Desert. Now, the thing about Rumble in the Desert is, I mean, I play a lot of block games, as you guys know. I don't really have any issue with the quote-unquote fog of war part of things. I think other things about block games make it easy or hard to play solo. You know, like Orange Swan, which this past month I played like a dozen times. That has two big mechanics, the naval engagement die roll and the random drawing of reinforcements, that make it very solo friendly, despite, you know, having, if you even have all the blocks turned towards you, it still makes it very solo friendly nonetheless. So block games per se are not something that I rule out automatically. Excuse me. That being said, the issue with Rumble in the Desert specifically is the logistics blocks. Because again, there are ones that you just, if you know where the logistics are, because logistics are basically everything in the North Africa campaign, then you're screwed. I mean, if you know where the enemy's blocks are at, you know where to go, get to his ammo dump, blow things up or capture things and stuff, and then it all goes to hell in a handbasket, so to speak. So, that being said, it's just extremely difficult to do it because the logistics play such a huge role in Rumble in the Desert. So, that's another one that it just doesn't quite work. And then last but not least, certainly not least, is Napoleons Triumph, which saw some sad news on Board Game Geek today with a thread that somebody posted that Simmons Games is shut down their website. Not really any kind of, no kind of real in-depth explanation. Just basically saying they're not going to be making games again at all, which is a bummer because their Stavka game was supposed to be coming out sometime, I don't think in the too distant future. They were working a lot on, which was basically Eastern Front of World War II, which I was looking forward to because, you know me, I'm always looking for, new presentations of the Eastern Front. That's why my previous video, Absolute Wars, is so high on my interest list this year. Napoleon's Triumph is very interesting. It's very fun. It's very slick, but it also is one of those ones that the fog of war is critical to success. If you know what other folks are up to, if you know where the other units are for sure, then it just doesn't really work real well. And again, this is one that I secured a copy as a birthday, Christmas present, one or the other, for not an outrageous amount of money. I mean, I think a decent amount of money. But, phew, man, I really tried to. I really tried to make it work, and I just kept hitting a brick wall. So it just wasn't working out so well. So, but again, it's very slick. It's very well done. It's very interesting. It's just not really a game that you can play solo, unfortunately. Now, I know a few of you out there in the audience are thinking to yourself, wait a minute, Tim, you own Hannibal, Rome versus Carthage, don't you? As a matter of fact, yes, I do. And I'm sure some of you are wondering to yourself, wait a minute, hang on, having your Blackadder moment, being like, well, how in the world do you make that work? Now, this, of course, is the first copy I ever owned of this. I finally picked it up. Oh, jeez. Oh, I'm thinking this way back, because I was still teaching and my friend Matt was still there. He left after a few years after I started to go to greener pastures. And I literally mean greener pastures, a school that was paying more money. But at first I had trouble with this because the battle cards. And then, of course, I found online an alternate combat method using a 20-sided die. But that wasn't super satisfying either. However, when Phalanx Games made the copy that I have with the first Punic War, I was like, God, okay, I want to pick this up and let me see if I can make it work. And the funny thing is that I found that with the battle cards, even though I would go and, I would go ahead and play my first card. And I would go through the opponent's deck and see if they had a matching card. Now, of course, in order to find that matching card, I would see, oh, well, they have this, or they have two, probes or whatever. But then I would reshuffle the deck and then randomly, flip one. And it actually, the funny thing is, it actually worked. I was skeptical at first. I was like, oh, great, well, I'll know what's there, so I'll know what to play or what not to play. But statistically speaking, because of the way the deck is built, usually, most of the time, there's an answer in some way, shape, or form. So, now granted, sometimes, you might have 4 advance on the right flank or whatever, and, the opponent deck may only have 1. But, if you don't have certain things, at the same time, you're probably going to be weak somewhere. So, I was surprised that it actually worked quite well. That was a big surprise for me. It took a little while to get there. And it took a little bit of playing and being like, okay, you know what? Let me see what happens next time with a battle. It was kind of like after a few times around with the battles and being like, is this really going to work? But the longer I kept at it, the more it did. So it actually worked out okay. So Hannibal works just fine that way, in my opinion. I like using the battle cards, actually, in Hannibal, and I still do. There's my playthrough posted of the Fierce Punic War. Excuse me, I drove a lot the last couple of days. Drove about 12 hours in 2 days. So it does actually work. So if you've been thinking about this and thinking to yourself, can it work solo battle cards? The answer is yes, Virginia. There is a way to make it work. So that's why you didn't see Hannibal Rome versus Carthage. Now, one other thing I want to mention, 2 games that I really enjoy, but are extremely difficult to play solo, but can be done. But they're kind of in that gray area of, it can be done, but it is tricky, it is difficult, and it can make for some funky things, is these 2, Twilight Struggle and 1960. Now, I understand, and I have not dug into this yet, that someone has actually made a pretty decent solo system for Twilight Struggle. I would be very curious to see how that works. But the problem with both of these games, because they have the same issue, is you have those cards that cannot be held at the end of the turn. You don't have that problem in like 30 Years' War or, Europe in turmoil or even Hannibal Rome versus Carthage. You really don't have that kind of issue in those CDG games, or like Washington's War. But this one you do. In Twilight Struggle, you're familiar with the game, you can't hold scoring cards. And in 1960, making it the president, you cannot hold the momentum cards. Now, a little easier in 1960 because the momentum cards, there's only 4 of them for the different geographical regions of the U.S. And once they are played as an event, they're out of the game. The problem, of course, is that, well, how do you figure out, how that works? What I have tried, and it kind of works, it kind of doesn't at times, is basically taking the opposing deck and shuffling the cards around, and basically then just checking the last card, by covering up the top part of the card with my hand, and just looking to see, especially making the president has that nice little bar at the bottom. And they both do. But the trick is, and this is where the issue comes in, the trick is that Twilight Struggle, the scoring cards are different colors. So if you catch a glimpse of that color, purple, it's the Europe card, you're screwed. Whereas Making of the President has the color at the top of the card, but not at the bottom where the stripe is saying, this card may not be held. So if you're careful, if you use your hand or use a piece of paper or another card even, you can, slowly slide it up from the bottom and you can see, oh, okay, well, this is one of the momentum cards. I don't know which one. And then just kind of, move it elsewhere in the deck and have a different card you can put on the bottom. That can be the held card in that particular case. But again, Twilight Struggle, the issue is each of the cards that's scoring is a different color. So, again, if you get a glimpse of that color and it's blue, well, hey, ding, 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 it's the Middle East card. So, and it doesn't take much to catch that glance, and you have to be real careful with it. So these two are ones that are kind of what I like to say is a gray zone. It's enough that I enjoy playing them, even if there are those little hiccups here and there, but it still makes it extremely difficult to play solo. But not quite impossible. Pretty close, but not quite impossible. So, alright, so there you have it. Again, I thought about this because I actually just purchased a game that I'm hoping I can make work solo from Academy Games, Strike of the Eagle, the Polish-Soviet War. And it has a lot of these kind of elements to it that makes things a little difficult to play solo. But I'm hoping to be able to pull it off. I have some ideas already how to do it. One of the things I'm thinking to do, since it has a diceless combat, and I don't know what this is going to do to the system, maybe it won't work, but I also was thinking about using the flat top idea of you roll a die and, extra hit, less hit, no change, which, again, will that cause balance issues? I don't know, but I'm willing to give it a shot, so then it will make it more solo friendly and a little more unpredictable. So we'll see. So anyway, there you go. Those are the games that I personally have found almost impossible, or nearly impossible, in case of those last two, to play solo. Next episode, I'm hoping, at some point here, as playtesting continues to go on with Orange Swan, I'm hoping to kind of show you a snippet of the game sometime in the near future. And of course, if I can get Strike the Eagle to work, you guys will be the first ones to know. So, that's where I'm probably headed to more than likely next on my agenda. So as always, this is Tim Kortstoy from Bare Bones Wargaming saying thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time, either from somewhere out in the wide expanse of the Pacific or someplace trying to defend Poland and the rest of Europe, quite frankly, from the communist hordes. Until then, well, at least until, defend it long enough that Pope John Paul II can eventually show up in Lech Walesa. That's another story for another time. But until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next episode.